Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Journey to Greatness, Day 203 at 365 with David McDonald, the GOAT. Wow. Happy Saturday. Dude, this life is so fun. Yeah, this life is so fun. Good morning. Good morning, Liz. Okay. I had a sore throat for the longest time. I think it was my allergies. But now, after drinking some green tea the other night, I'm feeling really good. Man, there's raining cats and dogs outside too. Okay. $6.35. Sweet. All right, let's take it to the top. See you on the other side. Excuse me. All right, welcome back, everybody. So, we just finished our meditation routine. Now we're getting into our reading routine, and we're reading A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. And yeah, it's been a pretty amazing book so far. So let's get into it. Good morning. Good morning, Brandon. How's it going, brother? Happy Saturday. Good morning, everybody. I'll see you guys here on the other side. Whoa. Hmm. Hmm. Amen. That's tight. Very interesting. Jeez. Okay. Welcome back, everybody. Dennis, good morning, brother. How are you? You got my email, right? I sent that email off. Okay, so we're gonna get into our journal, and this is journal 3 of 3. Today, my friends, is the day that we finish our third journal. Hundreds of pages of journaling in the last 6 months. Yesterday for journaling was day 170, 180, which means that was an indication of 6 months of journaling, which is awesome. So in the journaling exercise, I like to start off by writing about what I'm most grateful for. And that in the morning is A, waking up, and B, being in exceptional health. Then I like to go back to yesterday's activities. So if there's something yesterday that I appreciate or something yesterday that I'm grateful for, I reflect on yesterday's activities and say, okay, and experiences and say, okay, I'm grateful for this. And then I write about what I learned about and just really show my respect, to yesterday's activities because, only Lord knows that our lives can be taken from us at any moment. And so we should never take anything for granted. And then moving forward, anything that we wish to manifest for ourselves, we can write that down. So if you guys need help with that, let me know, and I'll see you on the other side. All right. Congratulations, everybody. Congratulations. Day 180 on the journey to greatness. We just or on the journey to greatness journaling, I should say. We've completed our third book, which is awesome. Awesome. Dreams, manifestations, everything. You know, in 10 years when they say, man, these guys are absolutely amazing. Where did they come from? How did they do it? I'm just going to go back and say, oh, we already wrote an autobiography about it, so I don't have to spend too much time talking to a ghostwriter. So let's do this. Good morning, sister. Sister Rose, good morning. Carl, my brother, good morning. Good morning. Oh, I got some updates for you, Carl. I got a message here. Auntie, good morning and happy Saturday. Oh, right. Eckhart Tolle. This guy, so I'm a historian by nature. I love history. I like history especially because it tells us where we come from. And for us to understand our history is only the real true way that we can understand who we are today. And that's how I really feel about everything. So, like, if there's a philosophy, if there's something that's created, a lot of the time I just trust my instinct, and truth is truth. And what I usually see is the universal truth, whatever truth that is, will reaffirm itself. Either it'll come about and somebody else will give you credibility for what you're saying, or a situation may happen where if it wasn't the truth, if it was a lie, then the situation wouldn't have went as smoothly as it possibly could have. Endless amount of things that I base my my fact sharing or my truth sharing or my inner sharings based on. But check this out. The history of communism, originally inspired by noble ideals, clearly illustrates what happens when people attempt to change external reality, create a new earth, without any prior change of their inner reality, their state of consciousness. They make plans without taking into account the blueprint for dysfunction that every human being carries within the ego. Now, this is a it's so awesome. Like, I feel like Eckhart Tolle could rule the world right now with just that one statement alone. But then you have to really, really think about it. There are legitimately companies, people that study our psychological behavior, even more so now with like Facebook and more like, and more technologies that are out there that study our patterns, our way of behavior through our actions online, which is totally cool. You know, I think we should know more about it. It should be more transparent, and I guess it is transparent, but you just have to look at it. So I guess it's more so like an ignorance thing of the total population, of not asking the question or not saying, well, you know, are our actions being tracked? What does it mean when we go online on Macy's or Amazon and we shop for, you know, we see a bunch of cell phone case covers? Like, for us to not draw one and one together, no opinion on that, but, you know, there's something going on there. And it's not, like I said, it's not bad. It's going to happen regardless whether we like it or not. It's not necessarily good either. But my point here is there are people who are 15, 20, 34 years departed ahead of us. And then 100 years, philosophies that their grandparents have carried into our century, who are thinking about how do we change the greater population's inner understanding of who they are. Communism did not work, or it does not work. And Eckhart Tolle is saying that. Hold on 1 second. For all my people who don't know what communism means, I'm going to tell you right here in 2 seconds. So communism is a political theory derived from Karl Marx, advocating class war and leading to a society in which all property is publicly owned and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs. So how can you have a society that flourishes like that when you have all of the population, right, with their ego? You're not doing anything to counterbalance their ego. So their ego is going to take over, and ultimately your system will fail at one point or another, either whether it's by interruption of other countries saying, hey, that's not right, or your very own people that you're trying to govern over. So we said this one time in our previous discussions. One of the greatest challenges that our founding fathers of the United States of America had was creating national identity. We're this huge melting pot, right? Yeah. Well, from there, though, how do you get a number of people who have, pretty much are non-native to, American or this U.S. soil, North American soil, to believe in the same thing across the nation? How do you get all these people on the same page so that now you know exactly what their designations are, you know what their political influences are or what their political drive is, and that's, in my mind, my theory is that's how you figure out why you have Democratic states, why you have Republican states, when it comes to election time. This is all stuff that's been mapped for a very long time, since the beginning of time of the U.S. And that was the hardest thing. But they needed national identity. The fathers and the first people who were interested in starting a political government, right? They needed national identity so that they can feed to the consciousness of all of the people. If one person in New York can say, "Oh, our brothers on the West Coast," or "Oh, our nation," right? The more greater identity that the U.S. had, the stronger the political system became. And then eventually, when they got big enough, now they're able to govern federally or across the entire nation. And then from there, they had delegates who manage each state. And then from there, you have delegates who manage counties and cities, etc. And so it gets to, it gets broken down to a trickle political system. And so this sentence makes total sense. And this is the stuff I love. So, very interesting point. You can't control a nation if you don't control their ego, or at least to some capacity account for their ego or the dysfunction of human. And we already said dysfunction yesterday. We clearly defined it, according to Eckhart Tolle, is sin or dukkha in the Buddhism culture or the Buddhism religion, and then also called the Maya in Hinduism. So the arising of new consciousness, the author continues, the good news of the possibility of a radical transformation of human consciousness. In Hindu teachings and sometimes in Buddhism, this transformation is called enlightenment, which is a very popular term, actually. The enlightened being. In the teachings of Jesus, it is salvation. And in Buddhism, it is the end of suffering. Liberation and awakening are other terms used to describe this transformation. So once we get, we live this life in a human temporary experience. Our bodies are temporary experiences. So this is David talking to you. Is not this face. It's not my hair. It's not my clothes. It's not my bracelets. It's not any of that. It's my spirit talking directly to your spirit. And so when we pass and our spirits, and our time is, over in this temporary physical experience on earth, our spirits move on. This hair, this face, these eyebrows, these eyeballs, my nose, my hands, my feet, everything has no life, right? Okay, so that clear, just being on that scale of, okay, we're in a physical experience. So we have the choice to live in a physical reality, or we have a choice to live in a spiritual reality. Remember, when I die, or when we die, or when a person dies, their spirit leaves their body, right? So therefore, the physical is no longer here. You have a physical experience or a spiritual experience. Which one do you want to live, right? Which one do you want to feed into? It depends on there's tons of depending options. Like, what do you believe in after you pass? Is there an afterlife? Is there not an afterlife? I'll leave that to you to decide. But But I would prefer to live a spiritual experience. You know why? Because I'll tell you why. Because our physical experience tells us, well, if I touch this, it's metal, right? It's cold. I'm seeing it. I look at it. If I smell it, it smells like titanium or some type of stainless steel, right? This is a microphone. But the reason why I would rather choose to live a spiritual experience is because your physical experience is, my point of the example is limited by what you see, what you feel, what you touch, what you smell, what you hear. If I give you this, pen, it's a pen. I can't really explain this. I can really explain this. Pause. So I hope I make sense. So at the end of the day, your reality isn't your reality, and you have the power to create something more than what you're experiencing today. But it all depends on how you think about your reality and think about your future. Let me continue reading here because I'm having trouble finding the words to say. He left a record of his teaching, so in the form of one of the most profound spiritual books ever written, the Tao Te Ching. So that's Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu is a Eastern Asian guru that came into his enlightenment. Him and Buddha both. Now, the trouble back then, to my understanding, was when you were enlightened, you were checked into, psychiatric wards, or you were killed, or you were publicly humiliated. Because at the time, there were people who had agendas, and for you to be enlightened would mean that you thought outside of the political or the collective consciousness. For you to think outside the collective consciousness would almost indirectly be a direct threat to the political system that was in place. Because you're not falling short, or you're not falling into the categories of the entire collective consciousness. So when you step out of that space, you are now starting to create a reality for yourself that goes against what the other political powers may want you to think. And so that was a huge threat. And so, most of the time you'd get shut down for that. So Tao Te Ching, I think I'm going to read that book next. I got to put that down in my notes because I heard that's a really good book. And if Lao Tzu, which is a gentleman from China who wrote these early enlightenment stories and early enlightenment realities or experiences, he shares them, and that's how his voice continues to live on, generational. But I heard that's a really good book, so we'll jump to that. But over the centuries, many things were added that had nothing to do with the original teachings, but were reflections of a fundamental misunderstanding. Some of the teachers were ridiculed, reviled, or killed. Others came to be worshipped as gods, teaching that pointed way beyond the dysfunction of the human mind, the way out of the collective insanity, were distorted and became themselves part of the insanity. And so religions, to a large extent, became divisive rather than unifying forces. Man made God in his own image. Okay, so what he's saying here is, so you have these great teachers of past time like Buddha, who we still know today, or Lao Tzu, who we still know today, at least for people who are in that space. And now introducing Lao Tzu. You guys should go look him up. Because these people were looked at as not being a part of the collective consciousness. Imagine, like back in high school, if you weren't the coolest kid, right, then people made fun of you. They called you a nerd. They called you a geek because you like books or whatever it was, right? And they made fun of you for whatever. And even today, people are really cliquish. Like they can't do stuff on their own. But in cliquish meaning, like they won't allow you into their group because you lack thereof. And it's like not necessarily ideology, but like if you're a super negative person, I don't want you around me, period. That's not cliquish to me. Or it might be to some capacity, but it's like if you're just super negative, like I don't want to be around you. That's just a choice, and I guess so. I guess other people have choices too, right? But my point here is because the teachings of these people who were enlightened went against the society collectiveness. Their teachings over time were pretty much diluted, and not only were they diluted, but they were distorted, and then it became a part of the collective insanity. So it was over here operating in this space, and then the collective society, which is pretty much gold, right? That's to a degree, it's if the collective society is moving in one direction, you can choose to go against it, but there might be a fork in the road at one point in time, depending on how big you become as an independent. But their views of this independent became so distorted that it started to fuse into the dysfunctional collective society identity consciousness. And then became divisive rather than a unifying force. So he gets really interesting. Throughout history, there have always been rare individuals who experienced a shift in consciousness and so realized within themselves that toward which all religions point. To describe that non-conceptual truth, they then used the conceptual framework of their own religions. Through some of those men and women, schools or movements developed within all major religions that represented not only a rediscovery, but in some cases an intensification of the light of the original teaching. This is how Gnosticism and mysticism came into existence in early and medieval Christianity, Sufism in the Islamic religion, Hadeism and Kabbalah in Judaism, and then they continue to go on, Buddhism. Most of these schools are iconoclastic. They did away with the layers upon layers of deadening conceptualization and mental belief structures, and for this reason, most of them were viewed with suspicion and often hostility by the established religious hierarchies. Unlike mainstream religion, their teachings emphasize realization and inner transformation. It is through those esoteric schools or movements that the major religions regained the transformative power of their original teachings. Although in most cases only a small minority of people had access to them, their numbers were never large enough to make a significant impact on the deep collective unconscious of the majority. Over time, some of those schools themselves became too rigidly formalized and or conceptualized to remain effective. So, whoa, that's a mouthful. What he's saying here is these people who operated in a different collective consciousness or understanding of religion, they got straight to the, and I like this a lot. I believe all religions are fantastic, okay? But when you really pull back all of the layers, like what are they really telling us to do? Are they telling us to decipher who came first, Muhammad or Jesus? And so therefore, if you believe this one or that one, that we all should hate each other for it, and that because of that order, that sequential order, there's wars, there's separation of people, the true dysfunction of man, which is a human reality. All of their sinful and hateful and negative, deep-rooted energy is pulled because of that sequential order of who came first, Jesus or Muhammad. Do you think that that's what, even with, Islamic or with Christianity, do you think that's what that was made for, or what that was the purpose of it for? Like, no, it wasn't. It wasn't created to create wars. It wasn't created to separate people. It wasn't created for any of that. I think at the end of the day, all religions emphasize that at the end of the day, this is how I feel, and I'm usually really neutral about this stuff, is that we should operate from a place of love, support, and encouragement, to name a few, right? If we were to live like God, whether you believe in God or not, that's totally cool. whether we were to operate like the universe, universal energy, you believe in science or you believe in evolution. At the end of the day, I feel that for me personally, I operate, or at least in my mind, I like to operate from love, support, non-judgment. And when I operate from those spaces, a lot of the other realities don't even exist to me. And so throughout history, these people, according to this, they emphasize a relationship of inner transformation. So not always outer, which some religions teach us. You always have to look out and worship something out. But if we're made in God's image and he so thinketh, so he is, which is words from the Bible, why are we looking outward so much? How come we're not looking inward more? And I think understanding that we're in this journey with multiple energies, multiple levels of things, I think that it's important for us to do inner perspective and inner reflection to a very large extent. I know I'm getting a little bit too deep because I don't like to really put my personal ideas in the air, but their numbers were never large enough and to have any significant impact on the deep collective conscious of the majority. So these people who always went against societal norms, their numbers never grew large enough to actually make an impact on on all of society, because the religions that were already established at the time, they are, and even today, are so strong that, there's a lot of resistance that's created. Oh, those guys are weird. Those guys are not a part of, and so it's kind of hard to affect a deeper consciousness when the system is based on, all of these other things. I mean, for goodness sake, Christianity was used to justify slavery just hundreds of years ago, right? And even still today, I'm sure, the Bible, the Christian Bible was. And so I think that's all, I don't know how to interpret that. I think that's mind blowing. But over time, at the end of the day, where these other these other religions that are going, the independent, religions or belief systems that go against the conscious reality, at the end of the day, they falter too, because they became too strict. They became too uniform. So now it's like an independent consciousness that includes everybody and everything. But because there's so much, energy to become a collective, now you're starting to combat against the collective consciousness, which in turn you become a part of it. And then now you have this big, interesting pot of dysfunction. They realize that having a belief system, a set of thoughts that you regard as the absolute truth, does not make you spiritual, no matter what nature of those beliefs is. In fact, the more you make your thoughts beliefs into your identity, the more you cut off you are from the spiritual dimension within yourself. Many religious people are stuck at that level. They equate truth with thought. And as they are completely identified with thought, their mind, they claim to be in sole possession of the truth in an unconscious attempt. Sorry, guys, I'm getting choppy here. They equate truth with thought. And as they are completely identified with thought, they claim to be in sole possession of the truth in an unconscious attempt to protect their identity. They don't realize the limitations of thought. Unless you think exactly as they do, you are wrong in their eyes. And in the not too distant past, they would have felt justified in killing you for that. So what he means here is, most people understand that spirituality and religion are two separate things. And quite frankly, they're not the same thing. Just because you have a set of thoughts that you regard as an absolute truth, that does not make you a spiritual person. So if you believe that, Jesus died on the cross, and for example, if you believe that Jesus died on the cross, and so therefore, as a person, you believe in the gospel that he came back, he rose, died for our sins, etc., that you have now the keys to the kingdom of heaven, that does not make you a spiritual person necessarily. Now, I'm not saying, or well, neither is the book, how I'm interpreting. The book isn't saying either that doesn't make you a faithful person, or a follower of Christ or whatever it may be, but it does not make you a spiritual person, no matter what the nature of those beliefs are, which is a very interesting distinction, because then he continues to say people equate the truth with thought. As they are completely identified with thought, their mind, they claim to be a sole possession of the truth in an unconscious attempt to protect their identity. So what he's saying is some people will say, well, I have this belief system, so therefore I'm a spiritual person. And because I have such a strong belief system, therefore I am also spiritual. But Eckhart Tolle is saying that's not the case. So wake up. You couldn't just stand and give a spiritual talk or publish a spiritual book unless you were sanctioned by the church. And if you were not, they would quickly silence you. So back in the day, and even, well, I guess not so much today, but back in the day, you weren't even able to write any type of spiritual book unless you were given permission by the church. In my mind, it's like if everybody is made to have free speech and everybody is made to kind of be on this journey together, how come they can't? Why would anybody need to be sanctioned by a church? And I think the answer to that is they didn't want to disrupt the collective consciousness. And so now he says, but now even with certain churches and religions, there are signs of change, which makes me very happy. It is heartwarming, and one is grateful for even the slightest signs of openness, such as a Pope John Paul II visiting a mosque as well as a synagogue. That's awesome. That is awesome. You have multiple religions that have derived from different places, from different men. And for them to be collectively together, I think it's awesome. But some people don't feel that way. Partly as a result of the spiritual teachings that have arisen outside of the established religions, but also due to an influx of the ancient Eastern wisdom teachings, a growing number of followers of traditional religions are able to let go of identification with form, dogma, and rigid belief systems and discover the original depth that is hidden within their own spiritual tradition. At the same time, as they discover the depth within themselves, they realize that how spiritual you are has nothing to do with your belief, but everything to do with your state of consciousness. So there's like multiple things happening here, and that's what we're dissecting. You have religion, you have spirituality, you have physical experience, you have a spiritual experience. See what we're doing here? So it's two different realities that people choose to live. And then you can have a mix or a combination of both. You can have a physical experience and you can be living you could have a physical experience and you could be living a physical experience with spiritual ideology, right? Or understanding spirituality. But usually you can feel when that is the case. Or sometimes it might be somebody who's living that experience and they're getting ready to transcend to spiritual living and spiritual ideology, right? And so there's a difference between it. You can have a combination of both. I don't really know what that looks like because I don't really look for it in other people. It just kind of speaks to me when other people speak to me. It's like, so with that being said, I think the biggest lesson for today is identifying that is the reality that we're living in, or at least this is one of the considered realities that we're living in. And to live a physical experience means that you're limited by your senses. To live a religious experience, just keep your heart open to the fact that at the end of the day, if you look at all the religions, their fundamental practice and teaching is love. And, to be loved means to be like God or to be like the higher universe, which is constantly pouring and giving into us every single day. Blessings on blessings every single day. And so at the end of the day, if you operate from those spaces, in summary, if you operate from those spaces, we're going to be all right as a society, as a person. And at the end of the day, we should always look inside of ourselves to find the answers and look inside of ourselves in terms of development, doing these masterpieces, doing journaling, doing reading, doing meditation, and really getting into the things that get us going and that make us go. So with that being said, thank you everybody for joining me. Episode 202 of 365. I'm pretty excited about this book. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. And a lot of these concepts are interesting, and some of them are new to me, but I know them, but they're putting word to thought. And so I know it's truth because it resonates really well with me and I align with it. And so as I get more comfortable with this literature and Eckhart Tolle's way of writing, I think these messages will come through a lot clearer. If you guys aren't getting it right now, totally okay. Just sit in for the next month and we'll go on this journey together. So have the best day of your life. Happy Saturday. Good morning to all my people who jumped on the messenger board. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. And everybody who's watching at home, thank you and good morning. I'll see you guys tomorrow at 5 a.m. Peace.